This is a journey. This is a journey.
Look, if you had one shot.
I put these just a collection here. The reason why I think a lot of this information, first of all, the people presenting his death, whenever they do movies, documentaries, they rarely, they might get a little close to some of the conspirators or whatever, but they're very often, if not probably most often, they'll stop far short of who it is and what their actual intention was and what his was. They don't want you to even know that. But the reason why some of that information now is, and I think some of us, if you're like me, you might be thinking, well, why didn't we hear this before? If it was real, how come, nobody said anything before? And I'm going to say because the people in charge didn't want you to know about it. They're the ones that went after him, much of the same way you see the media going after Trump in our time. He's well aware of this information. And once I give it to you, most of it, you're going to see that he actually refers to much of it, just like JFK did. But the difference between now and then is that, back then and now, but the media had a pretty broad control of everything. They had their hand on all the levers, so they could shut down that information or twist it and put it out however they wanted to. The difference nowadays is that we have the internet, and so everybody has access to all the information, whether it's newscasts. And one of my favorite is social media, and that's why I put that picture there, is because you know what? The truth is we can put out a lot of that information ourselves. In a very real sense, we don't need a mainstream media. If I had to cast a vote, I would vote them out. Let there not be any mainstream media anymore. The truth is they are conspiring against not just our nation, but they're conspiring against the world. These are the people that are referred to in the Bible, and they got many multitudes of people that they are working with, and they're far outnumbered. Don't get me wrong, but there's too many people that don't have a godly agenda. They're basically in between, and so they're easy to influence, for the enemy. But the difference, like I said, is that we have social media now. We can pass that information, on, like, if I was witnessing something, I could pull out my phone and take a video of it and send it to, instantly, close to 800 friends that I have on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, and because of that, people haven't been able to see the bigger picture and the pieces of the puzzle. In fact, one of the things the government does when they do security, I learned this from Chuck Misler's teachings, but I'll just paraphrase him a little bit here, is the levels that they break down information so that it's compartmentalized, basically, so that not any real, the majority of people cannot put it together and make sense of it. One person works on one part of the top secret jet airplane, another person works on another part, and so forth and so on. And only a handful of people put all of that together and put together the top secret, black ops or whatever it is. But hopefully you're starting to see these pieces, and they're starting to come together and forming the picture like we were doing before. So let's go on to the next one. So, again, just some other names. And this one's just to give you it a little bit over time. So The first one on the top there, secret societies, a little bit more modern, and especially within them are the Freemasons, are probably the most powerful. And there's different, Scottish Rite, York Rite, whatever you want to call them, but they're definitely the main players, I think, in our country. Illuminati, especially in the entertainment industry, the New World Order. This is when they start uniting, and they have a lot of organizations where they've come together in order to communicate their actual plans, etc. Sometimes we call them globalists. You can call them communists. I mean, that's definitely the ultimate agenda that they have, if you want to call it that. The Nazis, this is like their name in different times and different time periods. The Nazis definitely at some point, but a lot of people don't realize that those Nazis were actually working with a lot of people in our country during that same time. And then when the war started, all of a sudden, you had a lot of other problems going on. But, it's like a lot of people, they don't see how those ties have always been there. Communism was a problem. They painted the picture, and I think really to get us off what the Nazis were actually doing, they pointed us to the communism, the communists or the communism that was going on instead, and acted like they were our main enemies, much like they're doing right now. The deep state is by far our worst enemy here in this country. Those people who have infiltrated, certain parts of our government and so forth, but they want us to think it's Russia still. Now, that's a throwback, because prior to that, they wanted us to think, it was North Korea. Then Trump goes and makes peace with them. So what happens now? They need to hammer away at the ones that would be easiest for them. But anyways, during other periods of time, the Gnostics is a reference of during that existed in biblical times as well. Even synagogue of Satan, the Bible in Revelation refers to them. They claim to be Jews, but they're not. They're actually Satan worshipers. That one right there should wake us up, because when Jesus refers to them, they're actually in reference to one of his churches. That shouldn't shock us. These are wolves in sheep's clothing, so to speak. The Canaanites, you read about them in the Bible. The seed of the serpent was a reference. Jesus himself referred to these same individuals who were masquerading as Pharisees and Sadducees and so forth. A cabal is a common term used for them, and that one goes ancient as well as modern. But again, the other name is deep state. That's a more modern term for us. Let's look at this right here. Okay, I don't know if you've heard of this character. His name is Albert Pike, General Albert Pike. And it says, this is a quote from him. He says, "That which we must say to the crowd is, we worship a God, but it is the God that one adores without superstition. To you, sovereign Grand Inspectors General, we say this, that you may repeat it to the brethren of the 32nd, 31st, and 30th degrees. The Masonic religion should be, by all of us, initiates of the high degrees, maintained in the purity of the, what does this say? Luciferian doctrine." Think about it. He's calling them a Masonic religion, and he's saying who their God is. Lucifer. If Lucifer were not God, would Adonai, meaning Jesus, culminate, spread false and harmful statements about him? Yes, Lucifer is God, he says. Can you imagine? This is his statement, and he was a general of the Confederate Army. This was not one of the I remember years ago, I saw this one man on, I think it was a Phil Donahue show, and who just passed away, from what I understand today, as I'm doing this video, was Michael Aquino. He was a well-known, open Satan worshiper. And I think he passed away as a general, or he was the last, or whatever, a general in the military. And you know, to think that there's people in our government that are proud Satan worshipers. But like I said, when they use the name Lucifer, they're saying that he never lost his light, that he's basically the good guy and God is the bad one. So take that one, you know. So, you know, the problem I see here is that he's a general. He's commanding, you know, troops. And, you know, not only that, but it almost could make sense that, you know, why would, you know, he'd be leading the Confederate army, who would be like the enemies to our country at the time. In some sense, of course, not everybody in that, you know, aspired to these same loyalties, but let's look at something else here, because you think on the other side, and this was before, you know, the war, you know, the Confederate War, the Civil War, but if you thought, well, you know, our forefathers were okay though. Well, here's George Washington, and you can type up a picture and just put George Washington Freemason and go to images on Google, and you'll have tons of paintings and pictures like this of George Washington in his Freemason gear, his Masonic gear. And this is a statue here on the right with the Freemason symbol. And, you know, if I'm not mistaken, that's the one in Virginia, the lodge where they say every president goes there and does a ritual, you know, to Nimrod, or Apollo, however they call him, maybe even Osiris, however they name him, you know. But either way, the obvious right here, you know, you might be judging, well, you know, just because he's a Freemason or something doesn't mean he's worshipped Satan. And, you know, I'm willing to agree that, you know, probably a lot of the Masons, if not most of them, when they start off, they're at low levels, they don't see it. At least that's the testimonies, the multiple testimonies I've heard from people who have been involved all the way to the highest degrees, you know, that the lower degrees basically don't have that. They don't have that awareness, you know. They look at some of this information as some of the history, but it's not everybody, and it's not all, you know, Masons, and that's fine. But here's the thing, you know, if you know that it's associated with it, and then you understand why in the scripture the Lord tells people not to take oaths. He's referring to this kind of oath, you know, where your loyalties now are lying in basically in union with the enemy's, you know, with Satan's agenda. You don't want to be a part of anything like that. And then not only that, but they conduct rituals in order to advance in the degrees that they have aligned as, you know, steps in the process of becoming illuminated. And that's how they describe it, you know, illumination. And that comes from the angel of light, who is Lucifer, right? Who really is now Satan, because he's a fallen angel. So, you know, you're going to have to judge that for yourself. I know there's a lot of conflicting information out there. But when I look at George Washington and the founding fathers, and then I look at, for example, the flag over here, you know, with 13 colonies, I don't think that was an accident personally. When I see the layout, how they laid out Washington, D.C., you know, into a pentagram shape, and then there's a phallic symbol and a womb, you know, and I see all this symbolism, not to mention, you know, other components of our government. I'm not so sure. I tend to believe, my personal belief is that, you know, he was a Luciferian as well. You know, the truth is you can't trust all the history and the way they color it. But 13 colonies, was that just on accident? Because that's one of the numbers they use in their ideology and numerology practices, etc. Okay. Now here's another character that Adam Weishaupt, and I can't remember the time frame, but he's the one that's given I think the credit for creating you might call it the secret society known as the Illuminati, which now has a much broader reference nowadays. But it says the Illuminati seek to establish a new world order. This is apparently a quote from him. Okay, their objectives are as follows: abolition of all ordered governments, abolition of private property, abolition of inheritance, abolition of patriotism. That one should be an eye opener for our time. Abolition of the family. We kind of know the enemy's always been working on that one. Abolition of religion. Well, they have their own religion they're wanting to bring in. And then number 7, creation of a world government. So no surprise there, right? But the point is that I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was around 1600s whenever I should actually look that one up. Okay, apparently Adam Weishaupt was born in 1748 and died in 1830, so gives you just kind of a time reference, which would have been perfect for his time to basically have some influence. And I'm sure he was a known character to some of our founding fathers of our country. He existed right at that time frame. I even think that personally, I think when I relook at the history on some of it, with our break from the British government was also one of their endeavors as well. And then to form it into the 13 colonies, I think all that was, the secret societies, etc., the Illuminati, if you want to call them that, carrying out their aspirations. Okay, so here's some of the groups, just a list. Somebody compiled this list. Now we know some of them popularly, but maybe you don't associate these groups with the Mystery Babylon and the Beast. But, I'm going to tell you that they absolutely are when you look into them further. And of course, some of these, not all of them. I don't want to imply that every one of these groups, all the people are in unity or conspiring. There's a lot of people that are unaware that their groups are loyal, to a higher cause, you could say. But let's look at the banking and money group. Okay, the central banks, that one's popular. That's basically the Fed. We're talking about the Fed. Our government, has been working with the Fed since the early 1900s, and so the central banks, they're everywhere, all over the world. And they unite in their efforts through some of these other names, but they're basically a group of rich men that are running a pyramid scam in countries, with many countries in on it. There's always a loser, because eventually those pyramid scams collapse, and in this case the countries collapse, and we've seen that time and time again in our own country. But it happens all over the world, and that's how they keep transferring that imaginary debt onto the next country that gets into the scam, and the rest of them jump back in because they want to keep up and get their own corrupt dealings going as well, all the new politicians, etc. But central banks is a big one. They get together through International Monetary Fund. I mean, they got all these names that sound so official and so legitimate that, most of us didn't know. A lot of us didn't know that the Federal Reserve was neither federal nor a reserve. So, but the other one that's more obvious is the secret society group up there. Freemasons, we're just talking about them. A faction of them is the Skull and Bones. These other names are the ones that I would definitely point to, but these Grand Orient, these lodges that are, there's numerous Shriners, they're all over the place. The Knights Templar, there's actually religious ones like that as well. And, some of them, like I said, might be a little bit more legit than others. But there's all these different ones that have existed throughout history. And then there's the many that exist now within one. There's, when you see Freemasons, then, there's also little factions that break off from them that do the same work or work their way up into those same degrees of loyalty to Lucifer. These political groups, these ones we we technically, I mean, we very often think there's like some kind of security for us as a nation, but they're really out for themselves, and they're a part of the same conspirators, this group. But of course, government leaders are sellout leaders, but then they organize and they're doing things like in the United Nations. I mean, there's been so much corruption being exposed in the United Nations. You know, I love the fact that Donald Trump has kind of broken us away from a lot of these organizations, showing how illegitimate and sinister they actually are in what they're doing. I mean, they just got so many agendas that, you know, and these people are people that once they organize in a world conspiracy like this, you know, whatever their particular part is and what they're trying to, you know, govern or whatever, they very often are so corrupt, and they're not, you know, they're falsifying a lot of their information, and they're not being loyal to what they're saying to their own countries. Bilderbergers, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, the Club of Rome, Bohemian Grove. A lot of you may have. That's a good one to look up. What they do. That's actually like more of a location, you know, where these international leaders and especially our past presidents have gone to basically decide who they're gonna put in as president. The intelligence groups. Now that one's come out into exposure during this time as well with Donald Trump, especially the FBI and the CIA. But even British intelligence, they were in on the whole Russia thing that they're still trying to push here. But, you know, almost don't think of it. But, you know, the CIA started many of these things, especially the drug cartels. You know, and they work, whether it's British intelligence, Communist Party, you know, all these different places. Even if the whole group is not sold out to this agenda, many of the high players, high rollers in those groups are sold out, and they tend to guide the majority of their efforts into their New World Order plan. Okay. Then you also got the religious groups, of course, and that's the one too, especially we got to be careful with, you know, because they're playing off of some things that we know are biblical. Like we know that the Lord is coming back for a united church, but it's not going to be united the way these groups are trying to unite the church. It's actually the true church is going to be united in love towards God. And with that, it's not going to be a denominational thing for sure. It's going to be more like a love and intimacy, even a prayer endeavor to be hastening his coming through intercession. I mean, there's a lot of things that unite the church, but it's not an organization like any of these, you know. And then there's the education groups, and that one probably is one that we so much need help in. We need to expose the things that these groups are teaching the next generations as they come up, you know, in their education, because you probably didn't realize it, but a lot of the colleges and university levels, there's a reason why they have degrees as well, just like the Freemasons go up in degrees. Okay, and we're going to get into that eventually as well, but let's go on.